How we doing, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Wolf, and welcome to another Path of Exile build guide. Now, this is going to be my Ice Crash Berserker that the stream has aptly dubbed the Titanic. I know, it's a quality name. This is a solo self-found build that I've been working on over the past couple of days. It's had a few interesting results. I wanted to really see how Ice Crash performed, and the main reason was because I had a couple of items in my my stash here. Now, I was able to pick up a Debion's Dirge and a Hrim Sorrow. I think I've said those correctly, and I decided to see if I could make an Ice Crash build work. Because of the Hrim Sorrows, I have 50% Fizz to Cold conversion, and Ice Crash itself has a base 50% conversion as well. So I was like, you know, I might be able to make something here, and I've made something decent-ish. It is kind of a work in progress. It is definitely kind of a work in progress, but it's able to clear up to, we've been able to do up to tier 8 so far in solo self-found without having any real problems, and I could most likely take it higher if I were to farm better gear, or maybe even try to dual wield with this setup. This one I built around the Debion's Dirge, but I have seen some setups that run a dual wield weapon setup. I got a nice cold damage weapon as well that I was contemplating running, but for the current setup that I've got, it works quite well. Not the fastest thing in the world, and, you know, average bossing, as with most of my builds, but it is definitely an intriguing one. It feels like I'm playing a second variation on my Ground Slam Berserker. Okay, so the first thing we're going to cover, let's cover the gear, because we're here, shall we? So, of course, I got a Debion's Dirge that rolled pretty decently. It's not bad. Now, because of this, I was able to kind of realize the build that I wanted to go for. Now, you'll see that it gets increased elemental damage if you've used a War Cry recently. Now, the thing about Berserker is that we get something called Warbringer, which gives us life and mana whenever you use a War Cry. So this is going to give you a nice shit ton of healing, as well as a nice bit of mana regeneration. As well as it will also give you rage. So we get more attack speed, attack damage, movement speed, etc., but we do lose some life per second, which is a little bit annoying, but we build to counteract that. Now, because of that node that I just talked about beforehand, this synergizes extremely well. We're able to keep up this elemental damage pretty much 24/7. We'll be pressing Enduring Cry to be very, very tanky as a result. So, that gives us elemental damage, gives us a bit of knockback for survivability, which is quite nice, and then some movement speed. Now, as I was talking about earlier, I got a Hrim Sorrow, which we pretty much only use for the physical damage converted to cold damage. Now, I have to say that there is a prophesied version. I believe it's called Hrim Burn. I haven't gotten the prophecy yet, so that's just kind of how it goes, but if you're using this setup, aim for a Hrim Burn from the Prophecy, go and do that. You'll get yourself a nice pair of upgraded gloves that will work wonderfully for you. Because other than the conversion, these are really just kind of a wasted slot, really, but you get what you get to make a build work. Now, everything else is pretty much just solo self-found gear. For reference, my rings are just like resistances, a little bit of damage, max life. Make sure to get max life on every piece. This ring is actually quite nice. It has increased elemental damage with attacks. I would recommend trying to get that on as many pieces as possible. Go for increased LE with attacks on both rings, your necklace, and your belt. And then anywhere else you can get it would be quite nice. I've seen some GG level gear that has like LE attacks, cold damage. Like, you can get some pretty nuts gear, especially with Delve as well. You farm some whatever the cold fossils are, the frigid fossils, and you roll some GG rings and call it good. Just slam through the entire world. Could be pretty great. The only other unique that I'm using is an Ambush Charge. This is just because it's an armor base, and I realized without having an armor chest piece, I take a lot of damage. So I'm rolling with this at the moment. I was using a Carcass Jack before. I would probably go for a Brass Dome if you have one available. That's just me personally. I like to have a armor, tanky type of chest piece, and Ebu's charge suits that just fine, being able to give me some life regeneration whenever I get hit, and just life and resistances, allowing me to cap my resist a little easier, because I am playing solo self-found, so capping resists becomes an ongoing struggle in a way, and this allows us to mitigate that factor. Now, every other piece is pretty much just solo self-found stuff, like rares that are rolled well, a lot of life, belt, helmet with decent life, that's about it really. It's just more for the gem setup than anything. My necklace is complete trash, but I'm using it for plus all attributes. You could most likely roll something a lot better here. That cold res is also capping me, so I'm keeping it on for the moment. I tried to roll this with a cold fossil, and I didn't get anything really cool. I was hoping to get like cold damage and Ellie with attacks or something like that, or get some GG gear. No dice, sadly, but if you were going for that sort of thing, you can get an Impresence that I believe will allow you to use Frostbite for no mana. That would make your life very, very easy, and you would destroy pretty much everything. Now, we still use Frostbite in the build, but if you could get an Impresence there, you can add a Herald of Ice or something on top of that and go even farther. Now, that's pretty much the setup there. I have a few basic flasks. I have Bleed Removal, Curse Removal, as Ziri's promised, because I killed at Ziri on my RFer, so I was like, you know what, let's use this, shall we? Granite Flask of Adrenaline. This was, I don't really know if I want to keep it as Adrenaline. I may want to change it to like Burning Removal. Yeah, most likely like Burning Removal or something like that. But that's here. It works quite well. Very useful for survivability. And then I have a Quicksilver Flask. Now when I level, of course, I use 2 of them, but I threw the Ziri's Promise in there to give us a bit of chaos resistance and a little extra damage as well. Might as well, right? So that's the flask setup, a Bleed Removal Flask and a Curse Removal Flask. Very, very good. I've been experimenting with the Curse Removal Flask. You have to pay a lot of attention to get a lot of value out of it, but it seems to get the job done. Okay, now, gem setups. This is where it's going to get kind of interesting. In my Ice Crash links, I have Ice Crash, of course. I have Ellie with attacks, and I have Fortify. Now, the reason I have this is I literally have no other spots to put this in. Now, I've been messing around with Fortify, Leap Slam, and that sort of stuff. And I found that I just don't Leap Slam enough to keep Fortify up. So I'm experimenting with it in here. Now, I don't think it's the best. I have Ruthless down here for when I go into a boss. Ruthless is one of the best setups with this, and I have linked up the Cold Pen as well, because Cold Pen plus Frostbite is like 75% penetration, which is pretty good, and we get a little more of that in the skill tree as well. So we have a significant amount of Cold Pen, which is quite wonderful. A few different variations on this setup, actually. I was using multi-strike with Ruthless at one point as well, because that means that every time you right-click or every time you attack, you get a guaranteed Ruthless hit, because multi-strike hits 3 times. One thing I haven't really been able to experiment with is that when you use Ice Crash, you'll hear in the background that it does like a 3-hit, 3-stage type of attack, which I'm wondering is, does that 3rd stage get affected by Ruthless? Because in that case, then I'm getting 3 Ruthless hits per click, right? Now, I don't have a way to test that, but if anyone knows, let me know in the comments down below. But if that's the case, then Multi-Strike and Ruthless are just exceptional. The other thing is, though, is Multi-Strike will kill you on bosses very, very quickly. So, it's a kind of give and take scenario that I've been messing with in there with the Ice Crash links. Now, moving down to my gloves, I've got a CWD, Blood Rage, Stone Golem, and Culling Strike. Cull on the Golem to just whack the guy and, you know, make my life a little bit easier. Gotta try and min-max the links as much as possible because I don't have a 6-link in either setup. I've messed around with 5-link and a Tabula, but I found that it really wasn't worth losing the survivability of a good chest piece on this build. So Stone Golem, you can maybe take Flame Golem if you feel you need the more damage. I like the life regen, just makes, you know, life easier. Makes me have to worry less. And then Blood Rage for Frenzy Charges to give us even more attack speed on top of Berserker. So we can go a little bit nuts in that regard. And then we're going to move over to, let's do our shoes next. I have increased duration, area of effect, frost bomb, cast when damage taken. This was a recommendation from Stream. It's an extremely interesting setup that I've been working with here. Essentially, whenever you take enough damage to proc the frost bomb, it'll drop a crystal that'll pulse and reduce cold resistance even more. So we had 75% pen before. This is another 25% on top of that, which will give us, you know, quick math, like 100% cold pen, which is quite nice. I'm still experimenting with if that's worth it or not, but it seems to have done pretty well for me so far. Moving over to the chest links, we have Leap Slam, Enduring Cry, Frostbite, and Blasphemy. In here, you can see what I mean. Like, I would put Fort on Leap Slam, but I need to get this as like a 6-socket and that sort of stuff. And yeah, RNG has not been kind to me. I burned through 150 jewelers on this thing to try and get it 6-socketed. Yeah, no dice. We're still here. So that's how it is sometimes. But yeah, so we have Leap Slam just for the ability to have Leap Slam, move quicker, etc, etc. Enduring Cry, because I was talking about that earlier. And then Blasphemy, Frostbite, to have Frostbite as an aura that will reduce cold resistance to anything around me. And we also have a Hatred. We have Hatred, which is sat in my weapon right here. Now, I did have another setup earlier. Essentially, I've re-rolled this necklace. It originally had Grant's level 22 Hatred on it, which was interesting, but it was the only thing it really had going for it. So I was able to get a shit ton of damage out of that. I don't have that anymore, so I slotted the Hatred into my axe in the little bottom slot that I had spare there. And then in the top helmet link, we have Increased Duration, Immortal Call, Cast when damage taken, and Cold Snap. Cold Snap is just kind of like, it was blue, I didn't have anything else. Cold Snap works. I was messing around with Ice Nova before. Seemed to kind of work, get a little bit of freezes every now and then. But nothing really spectacular here. I would probably put maybe, I don't even know what I would put there, if I'm honest. Maybe an AoE could be interesting, but, well no, AoE wouldn't link to CWD. Yeah, it's just the extra slot, so it was what I had. I didn't want to mess around with too many chromes and risk screwing up the item entirely. And in solo self found it is definitely possible to roll an item and then not have the ability to make it back to something you can use. I've done that before. Do not recommend it. And that's the links and the gear. So let's pop into the skill tree very quickly. And it's a pretty decent skill tree, pretty decent. I think I've passed about as well as I could. There's a few things I want to talk about in here that I would recommend doing if I could buy refund points. Sadly, I can't. But there's a few things that I'll tell you for if you're going to play this build, you can make a few changes. Alright, so we start off getting life and armor, pretty simple. Now, I get diamond skin on pretty much all my SSF builds because all resist, you don't need this. If you can gear for it and gear it out, you'll be just fine. I get Heart of the Warrior, and then up Born to Fight, and up and out there. But I also go up to Armor Mastery for life regen, come down through here, get 2 points, go to Juggernaut here, take this 3rd point. I did this a little bit later on. You can do that however you would like to, but grab this, come through, go up, get Res Technique. Now, the reason I do that is so I can get the Axe Cluster here. These are recent pickups, but I will say that getting Res Technique is very, very needed. Before I had it, I would miss quite a few hits, so make sure to grab this. But some of the earlier nodes I would recommend grabbing, go up to Armor Mastery, down through here, come down and get Battle Cry right here. This is making War Cries instant, so if you're using Multi-Strike, you can use your Ice Crash and do all of your attacks, and then still be able to War Cry in the middle of it. Because if you don't have this node, you still have an animation on War Cry, which means that you'll Multi-Strike, and then you can't War Cry during it, and you'll get flopped. Definitely had that happen. Be very careful. Then we get Bloodless, Life, and Can't Leech. Quite nice. Come down a bit. Dex, Int, that's for gear and gems and stuff. Pretty sure. That's most likely what that's for. And then we come through here. Jewel Socket. I got pretty lucky and got a double attack speed jewel. So that's quite nice. Always nice to maximize this with multi-strike. That's when I was using multi-strike. I had some pretty insane attack speed, but I've since taken it off personally. Then we get Golem's Blood for life regen. Come up here, Master of the Arena for life regeneration. Come through here for life. Art of the Gladiator for dex and removing movement penalties as well as attack speed. And then I've been working on, I come in and get Destroyer, 2 points, free damage. Quite nice. And then on this tree I go up more to this end. I was going to originally go over to the elemental side, get all of the cold damage bonuses and that sort of stuff. But since I've done a little bit of research, I have a recommendation for you to go a separate way. What I'd recommend doing is either going from this side or from this side and go over here, down, and then you can get Fangs of Frost to get cold damage with attack skills and cold damage penetration. Now, from here, I would go up here through to this side and get Primeval Force, because this gives you 20% increased elemental damage, reduced reflect, more elemental penetration, and LE damage during flasks. And I'm using it as Serious Promise, so that would be quite nice. But sadly, no dice. And then we come up here, get Dex, and then we can get Flash Freeze and Winter Spirit for cold damage, and 20% more of physical converted to cold, meaning that you don't really need to use the Freedom Sorrows if you don't want to, but you will lose out on 30% conversion. So that's what I would recommend doing, and kind of taking out some of the points up here. If you want to just do a direct copy, I go up a little bit, get Words of Glory. I would recommend this very highly so that you can use War Cries with Warbringer to be able to restore your mana instantly. I would make sure to grab that. Speaking of, I've messed around with Rallying Cry a little bit. It was nice, but I didn't really survive as much as I wanted to. So be careful in that department, and I would just kind of stick to Enduring Cry personally. And then I came up, got Divine Fervor here, Ellie with attacks, and Holy Dominion. Holy Dominion is quite nice for all res, solo self-found, makes life easier. And make sure to grab Tireless for a ton of life. Get Combat Stamina right here for life regeneration. And then get a Jewel Socket here. I have attack speed and a Resists Jewel. And then come in and get the Scion Life Cluster. Now, this build has done interestingly. There's a lot more that I could do with it. But I have recently embarked on a 30-day to kill Shaper challenge with a build that hopefully will be able to do it. So this build is very fun, very interesting, but I don't think it's really that fantastic when it comes to bosses. And I decided that, you know, I'd never really done Shaper before, so let's make a character that was good enough that I could kill Shaper and maybe finish the game, finish the Atlas, and do all that sort of stuff. This character I don't think has the damage to get anywhere near that, but it is nonetheless an interesting concept. That is, I believe, everything. There is Pantheons to cover. I take Brine King, and I take Rislada. I've been messing around with these as well. Rislada is pretty good to get curses and bleeding removal back when, like, say you're doing a boss or that sort of thing. Quite nice. And Brine King is just the mitigation for not having grabbed Unwavering Stance. I could take that as well and switch this out, but yeah. The other one I was working with was when I was using multi-strike. Tukahama works quite well because you are, of course, stood still during the multi-strike animation, so Tukahama will work very well for you. But I believe that is pretty much everything for the Titanic Ice Crash Berserker. A very interesting build. It took a little work to get it going, but all in all, it is pretty fun, and as something I just kind of threw together out of items I had in my stash, it kind of got a little farther than I expected it to. It managed to come into its own quite easily. That's going to be all for me, and as always, take care, gents. Thanks for making it to the end of my video. If you enjoyed it, take a look at the 2 pieces of content you're seeing on screen right now. If you wouldn't mind, you can click that big red button and see more updates from me. And if you want to go even further than that, then you can take a look in the description to find my new Patreon link. You boys gotta keep the lights on somehow.